Today I'm going to attempt to take the bottom oil pan off of my 2023 KTM 890 Adventure R. On the internet there's zero videos explaining how this is done. I have the official KTM repair manual as well, but that doesn't really show the process either. And the only thing I did find was Big Rock Moto talking about doing this to his when he punctured his oil pan, and he said that he had to loosen the radiator and then loosen the exhaust at the headers in order to bring the exhaust down enough to clear these bolts. What I did was I buggered the threads on this one when I was putting it in 2 oil changes ago, and it is kind of a disaster waiting to happen unless I change the whole bottom oil pan. I misread the torque wrench and over tightened it and carved off a few of the threads. So I want to replace it. To get out everything, you have to take off these 4 bolts on the skid plate, and then there are 2 underneath to take the skid plate off and the tank protector. These are 8mm, so it's pretty easy. They're also Torx. If you want to do it with Torx, you have to ignore these. That comes off with the skid plate. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is that the bolts on the front of the skid plate are a different length than the ones on the bottom. And the skid plate just comes off like that, and you have to undo this little vent line to take it right off. So I got all the oil drained. I put those back in place because I don't want it to just be dripping and dripping. I saved the oil, so that's a good thing. And I took out this screw, and I took out the 2 retaining bolts at the bottom of the radiator, but there's just no way that this is going to move yet. So what I'm thinking is it's very likely that I'm going to have to remove these side panels. In order to do that, I got to get this screw right in there, which probably means that I have to remove this to get this off. The hardest part of this whole thing was getting at the bolts that hold the headers in way up in there. And I could not, no matter what I did, loosen this off enough to pull it out. So what I did was I ended up using a series of connectors on a small wrench. So that I needed that really long extension with the knuckle on the end of it to be able to get right in there. Now it's going to be fun getting them back on, but I got it off, and I had to actually take this down, which is the bar that the skid plate is attached to. So I had to take this down to get it out of the way as well. So I've got those undone, and I need to go around to the other side of the exhaust and undo that, and then I should have it free enough to get at the bolts on the other side. All right, as you can see, I was able to loosen that enough to have that down far enough so I can get these bolts out now. All the bolts are out, and I have been hitting this with the rubber hammer a few times, and I can see the seal is already starting to loosen up. Tomorrow I shall remove that pan. Now, one thing to note is that these bolts that hold the pan in are differing lengths. There are about 5 of them that are a little bit longer than the other, so it's a really good idea to make a diagram so that you know where the longer bolts go and the shorter bolts. So I got this off this morning, and that is the gasket, and this is where the filter goes, and here's the 2 drain lines with the secondary filters in them, screens, magnets. And the one thing I'm really pleased with is that there is literally, there's so little metal inside here, which indicates that there's very little wear in the engine or on the cams. Here is the mating surface, and it came off perfectly clean. Got it off, got it into the solvent tank, and cleaned it up. Looks pretty good, but right here is the reason that I'm replacing this, is that I carved off some of the threads here, and there's only 2 threads left on that drain hole, whereas this one is perfect. This is the new oil pan, and I put a little bit of Polaris sealant that they gave me at the motorcycle shop around on the top and bottom of the gasket, so that I get a good seal. And I tightened everything back up in a crisscross pattern so that you can mate the surfaces evenly. So that's all up and on. I'm happy about that. They also gave me a couple of these, and those are the silencer grommets for attaching the skid plate. And now is going to be the hard part, is getting those nuts back on these headers. So that's going to be pretty interesting. So I got the exhaust all back together. I was surprised because it wasn't that difficult to get up here at these nuts. So this is the setup that I would recommend to get into the tight space where the exhaust headers are to get at the bolts, because it's literally impossible to reach it with a straight extension. So you need this long extension to get in there, and you also need this knuckle on the end that articulates, and then your 13 mil socket. And then this is really handy to be able to flip this around. A little tip is that up through here I put a strap and put the exhaust in place where it should be, kind of strapped it in to hold it in place while I got everything in, and that really helped. Now the project is to get everything back together as far as the radiator bolts and screws go, get that on, and then get all the side panels back on, and the final thing will be the skid plate. All right, got her all back together, and the only thing I'm holding off doing is putting the oil back in because there is a little bit of that sealant in there, and I want to wait until it's got a full cure. Another thing to keep in mind is when you take the nut off the header, and there's 4 of them, make sure you put them back on in the proper direction because they're not a regular nut. They've got a lock washer welded too, so then that goes on the outside. I think we're pretty much good to go. So it wasn't all that terrible of a job. It was just a lot of getting things out of the way to actually get at the oil pan. But the oil pan itself was easy, and the guys at the shop treated me very well. Go AZ and Flagstaff, great bunch of guys in there.